Hello, everybody, and welcome to WordCast number 74. We got a lot of interesting news for you guys today. The beginning of it is actually starting with some of the stuff involving George Floyd, and then we're going to move on into security news, which is going to be a pretty consistent thing that we have, and quite a few other interesting bits. But the first section here is definitely going to be about everything that's going on in the world right now and how important it is. So I'll let
Yeah,
Daniel take the lead
so
on that.
the death of George Floyd, which was a tipping point really for a lot of ongoing issues in the United States, especially involving police brutality and racism and systemic issues and a lot of things, has reverberated through every industry. And this is actually our second time attempting this intro. So I have already said this to you, but it's been wild to see for us how, like, in our lifetime, outside of big, like, specific moments like 9/11, there hasn't really ever been like an ongoing thing that's completely taken over and like encompassed the news for long periods of time. And we're seeing that multiple times this year alone. We've seen it with COVID, and now we're seeing it with the death of George Floyd, leading to massive global protests and in cases, riots and other things around the country. And it's just been wild to see. And we've seen massive responses from tech and especially from gaming. And so that's going to be a lot of what we end up talking about in this, because the gaming industry has responded
Gaming's been
hard.
a
Like, we've seen a lot
big
of tech
one, yeah.
companies say things, but we've seen a lot of gaming companies do things, and I think that's really important right now. Um, and so we'll kind of go straight into the news of it, because the other things that I kind of want to talk about pertaining to it, kind of the news will relate to it, and so I think we're still doing it justice talking about it. The first big thing, and if you watched
Yeah,
our last
yeah.
wordcast, you know that we were expecting to talk about the PlayStation 5 event in this episode. Um, yeah,
That was gonna be our big
Sony
topic.
had delayed that, and I'm gonna pull up and actually read their statement, because a lot of companies have made statements,
Mhm.
but I think that this is important, how they phrased it. So they said, "We've decided to postpone the PlayStation 5 event scheduled for June 4th. While we understand gamers worldwide are excited to see PS5 games, we do not feel that right now is a time for celebration, and for now, we want to stand back and allow more important voices to be heard." Now, there's a couple ways to read that, because obviously a lot of companies are making statements because they feel they have to make some kind of PR statement. And
Yep.
it does also make sense that Sony would not want their PS5 events news coverage to get drowned out by everything that's going on. However, I think that what was really important there was when they
Yeah,
said,
yeah.
to stand back and allow the more important voices to be heard, because ultimately, with protests, the main goal of any protest, the main like initial goal to achieve its end goals, is to get people talking and thinking about the issue. And so in this case, yeah, in
Yeah,
this
yeah,
case,
it's
choosing to
raising
delay
awareness.
such a important major event from Sony is not just a PR thing. It is,
Mhm.
whether or not this is ultimately their intent, it is meaningfully helpful in getting people who otherwise, at least in that moment, would have ignored the conversation, to keep focusing on it and keep thinking about it and keep talking about it. Yeah.
No distractions, yeah,
They're
exactly.
they like, this was a big deal for them. They have not really talked about the PlayStation 5 much at all. They've given a technical conversation for developers. They gave a couple Wired articles about the specs, and they showed us the controller. This was really the start of their
Yep.
marketing push, and they're not delaying the console. And so that means less time for marketing. They are taking a real hit, in reality, by delaying this. Um, and I will say, I
Oh,
don't
absolutely,
think
yeah.
that we would have seen a delay like this if it was a physical conference, because that's just so much harder and everything to delay.
Well, there's so much, yeah, there's so much planning that goes into that, and, that's harmful to, people and
Yeah,
businesses that were
it
gonna
costs
attend
a
and stuff
ton
too,
of
because
money
they
to delay
financially
something
plan
like
for it.
that, for not just for Sony. If it was just Sony, I
Yeah.
could see them making that decision, but it's not just them. It's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
really big decision to make when you're talking about flying, potentially hundreds of people from around the world and small developers and stuff like that all around.
Yep.
So I think it would have been a harder decision for them to cancel. And so while COVID has been horrible and has had a lot of detriments, the fact that it made this event digital did end up helping in this moment in keeping the topic going. And so I think that's really important. And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
just
it
want to say,
did.
like, Sony in general, while we haven't seen outside of this, we haven't seen a ton of actual action from them. I will say that they have given the person running their Twitter, like the actual Sony Twitter, the main brand's Twitter, a lot of leeway to share important resources and to even like ask people on their Twitter to hold them accountable to actually acting on it. And so I think that that's been really impressive.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of companies do things, but I don't think I've ever seen in this situation or in any others, in many other situations. I've seen it here and there, but like such a massive company say, yes, hold us accountable to ensuring that we actually act on something so important. And so I think that's really impressive. And
Yeah,
in a lot
yeah.
of the discussions about how PlayStation's responded, I haven't seen much discussion about that because it came from the Sony brand Twitter and not the PlayStation Twitter. And so I wanted to bring that up.
Mm. Yeah, okay, that was actually something that I hadn't known about it. So, um
Hmm.
I think it was the right move. I think it was the right move, kind of as you mentioned, both from a business standpoint, but more importantly from a social standpoint. And I, these events for something, especially like a console launch, is just such a big event that
Hmm.
distracts so many people. And I think it's important that they're kind of acknowledging that and okay with delaying that. And as far as I understand, I don't know if you said they are
Correct.
delaying
There are
it
some
indefinitely,
rumors
right?
that it's going to be late next week, probably the possibly the 12th is what the
Okay.
4chan rumor is suggesting. Um,
Probably depends
yeah,
if
I
things
imagine that
change or
they are
not, though, right?
internally setting
Yeah.
tentative dates. That way, if things go the way that we hope they
Yeah.
go and meaningful change happens and this starts to die down for valid reasons, then they'll be ready to make announcements. But a lot of the people that were
Yeah.
saying that it was probably going to be the 12th were also saying we'd probably get an announcement today, and we didn't get an announcement today. So we'll
And we
see. I
didn't.
don't think Sony's going to announce something until they're sure. They don't want to keep announcing and delaying. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
y-
this is number
uh,
two already, right?
no, this
Or is this
is
the third
not. They
delay?
haven't really delayed the games one. That when they came and announced this event, they said for the 4th.
Okay, yeah, I
Um,
guess that was that. Okay, right. But then I guess I'm thinking more back to people
correct. Yeah.
complaining that they're not
Yeah.
talking about it enough.
And so I guess at that point we'll move on to the next major action. Oh, go ahead. Did you have something else?
um, Yeah, I did just want to say I actually meant to say it earlier, but just for everybody that is watching and stuff is we there's obviously a lot of information around everything that happened with George Floyd, and really here we're not here to talk about the things that we may not know as much about. We're here to talk about the how it's affecting the industries that we
Correct.
report on,
At the end of this
and
section,
obviously
like I want to
you
close
know
it out with sharing some content from Black creators sharing their perspective. I think that's much more
yeah,
helpful to add to the conversation um, than our opinion. Like
yeah,
right
yeah,
now, really, a lot of people need to do a lot of listening and hearing what these people go through. Um, you know, if you've
absolutely,
been
yeah, and we
directly
can't report
affected
on that
by it, it's a
obviously.
lot different than just hearing that and sharing what they've said. Like if I'd much rather just you hear it from them than you hear it from us. Um,
Absolutely.
correct.
No,
Yeah.
no regurgitation or anything
Hear
like
their
that.
words,
Raw
see and hear
sources.
their emotion. And I think that's important, and we'll talk about that more as we get down to the section of the content that I want to share. Um,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
And I think it's important content to share.
So the next thing is correct. There's
Also
going to be a
game
lot of
related.
game related stuff. So
Yeah, they
yeah,
responded really
Take
heavily.
Two as a whole, which is a very large publisher. They oversee Rockstar, 2K, Private Division, a lot of stuff. Yeah, they
They're
shut
pretty
down the
enormous.
servers for every single one of their games that have an online component for 2 hours today to honor George Floyd. And the reason that they chose today is because today was his memorial. And so they specifically timed that. I
Oh, I
believe
see.
it started at the end of his memorial, if I'm not mistaken. And so the point was to
Okay.
essentially kind of continue that honoring him and honoring his life. And so that means, Grand Theft Auto 5, Red Dead Redemption 2's online servers, NBA 2K, all of that was down for hours. And so if you have made, whether you chose not to pay attention to this or um, somehow you hadn't
Somehow
heard
you
about it or
hadn't heard about
something,
it.
or especially even before all of this with the coronavirus stuff, a lot of people were getting like information overload and choosing to try and like dial back
Hmm.
paying attention to the news and social media. And so while there's
Well, and this was a global thing
correct,
that
yeah.
Take-Two did too here, right?
Um
So that's yeah. So that's gonna help in places that
yeah.
maybe
And
are
so it's
likely
like
to have not heard about
within the
it.
US at least, while it's unlikely that anybody hasn't heard about it, it is likely that there are people who have heard about it, and for a number of different circumstances, they have chosen not to look into it more. And this is kind of Take-Two's
Yeah.
way of making it so that if you've been, let's say, using games as your outlet and you've been completely ignoring everything going on, well, if you go on to GTA and it's not working, you're going to look up why. And this is their way of
Yeah.
making sure
Yeah.
that people see it. And again, this goes back into, like with what I was saying about Sony, where the the point of the protest is to ensure that people are seeing and hearing it and thinking about it. And this does a good job of achieving that for those who have been ignoring it for one reason or another. And so I think that this was
Hmm.
a very good move. They did do it from 2 to 4 p.m., so midday. So it also didn't affect, like if you're coming home from work and playing, but it's more so it's affecting the people
Yeah.
that are at home all the time, or at least during the day of on a
Well,
Thursday.
a lot
Exactly,
of
yeah.
people are right now
And so
too
that
at
that
home all the
really
time.
sends,
So
I think an important message, and again, really helps keep that in the discussion and keep that on people's minds.
and it's definitely this kind of stuff that I think is more important than uh
Yeah,
changing a logo. That's something that has bugged me, is that's just a PR stunt at that point. And it's just like every other movement
mhm,
or anything that companies claim to support
yeah,
is just a PR stunt to make money. And so actually, taking some form of
yeah.
action is important, I think.
And then the next thing we're going to talk about is Call of Duty. Now, for one, they did delay the start of their new season. We don't know when that's going to start, but that's not really the big thing that needs to be talked about pertaining to Call of Duty and Activision.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Activision,
So
man.
Activision had put out their PR statement about the ongoing situation. And if it was just that, we probably wouldn't be talking about it because I don't really want to just talk about just the generic PR statements that every company is putting out. But after they did that,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
faced a number of criticisms. For one, that statement just feels much more hollow when the statement was talking about how they wanted people to protest. Meanwhile, they banned a Hearthstone player for protesting the situation in Hong Kong. So, like, it just
Yeah,
seems like
yeah. And then we
pandering when
had
it's coming from
like
Activision compared to most anyone else, because they have literally banned people and punished
yeah.
people for protesting.
Yeah, for speaking out against,
Yeah.
so many different things. I mean, they have not usually been a proponent of taking
Yeah.
action except when it's
But
China.
then the other big thing is that after they shared that statement, a lot of people started pointing something out. So, and I didn't even know this before this story came out. For those that don't know,
Me neither,
in
yeah.
Call of Duty Modern Warfare in specific, um, independent of your Battle.net username or your console gamer tag, you can actually change your name via the Activision ID as part of their like multi-platform or like crossplay setup. Is that they have their
Yeah.
own unified ID system, and that means you're allowed to change your name. And so it doesn't necessarily show your gamer tag if you're playing on Xbox. It might show your Activision ID. Well, Activision did a piss poor job of their name filters, and so they, for whatever reason, did not put in a filter for the N word with a hard R.
There is there is no they did a shitty job with their filters.
Yeah.
This is just complete negligence. Like at that point, like that's one of the first words in the list of words that you would put in the
Yeah.
database that's checked
Yeah.
for preventing. And so like if you're gonna put words like fuck and ass in there, and you're not gonna put the N word in there, that's at that point complete lunacy.
And like
I don't
I
see
am
an
not
excuse
talking like,
for it.
slightly misspelled to try and bypass the filters. I mean, I am talking your standard proper spelling of
Yeah.
that word was allowed by Activision. What the fuck?
I just don't even
Yeah.
I can't even comprehend that. Like it just doesn't make like they'll go out of their way to come up with other spellings of words to prevent them from being used. But somehow this was still available, and it's not like it's hard
No,
to add extra
not at
words
all.
to it. It's
And
not. And so like I'm sure they've been told
like
about this before too. I'm sure they've been told about it before
racism
and just
within
didn't
Call
do
of Duty
anything.
has been a big issue for a long time. By nature of it being one of the larger games,
Yeah.
it's going to have a problem with toxicity no matter what they do. But racism in specific has been a big discussion as far as the extremes of the toxicity. And so it's not like this has not been a known issue for them. This has been the case since I started playing Call of
Yeah.
Duty back in Call of Duty 4. People have tried to find ways to put
It's been
inappropriate
forever,
clan
yeah.
tags and other things like that. And so this is not a new situation. And the fact that they failed to
Yeah.
block what is one of the most like intentionally pointed and worst words to use, like of all of the banned words,
Yeah, I mean this should be
of all of the
basically number one on
banned
the
words
list.
in any list,
Yeah.
this is the one that is used to specifically hurt people the most.
Yeah, it's a targeted thing that, and it's not used in the any other context, right? It's not like the F word, which is used and can be
Correct.
used
Yeah,
not
yeah.
directed at a person, right? So it's just like it's up there with one of the absolute first words
Yeah.
that should be on the list. It just doesn't make sense to me how that was missed by anybody. I mean, I don't know how you can not
And
think
this
about
is
that,
not
right?
an excuse for Activision, but it something tells me that I have a feeling that the team that oversees that list has little to no diversity. And I don't know why the
Yeah, no,
people on
that's
that
probably
team still
true.
didn't think of it. There is no excuse for that, but it tells me right there, and this is one of the
Yeah.
things where, when we talk about diversity in tech, this is one of the things where that comes into play, is that, it's if you never say that word and you never receive that word because you're white, and it's just something that is not directly thought about, that is the only way that that could possibly get missed, is essentially white privilege
Yeah.
out of ever like dealing with that word. And there's no excuse for them missing it because again, it's been
like
a core
proof.
issue within Call of Duty. Um,
Yeah. So there's absolutely
yeah.
no excuse in this situation, and then I think you're right. I think it's also a level of proof of
Like
of lack of
literally,
diversity, at
if
least on the team that was
one
working on this.
person at Call of Duty that handles their reports, or that is in a position of power, at least with handling their reports to suggest things to higher ups, or anyone on the tech team
Yeah.
was of African American descent, directly African descent, anything like that, this would not have been an issue. I don't.
Yeah. Well, I imagine it would be. I mean,
Correct. Yeah.
Hispanic descent and
I'm just
stuff
saying,
too,
like,
because it's
this
something
is
that's going to be on
something
their
that
mind
is
more, right? Is
like, if realistically, if anyone saw this should not have been the case. Like, anyone saw that word come up, but
yeah.
there clearly has to be a diversity issue for this to have been missed in the filters for that long, for them to have not thought that this is a problem.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's been talked about before. There's
Yeah.
no
So
no way around it.
I do want to pull something up as far as their statement, just to clarify all of the changes that they are making. And before I go on to
Okay.
read through their statement, I also want to say, any company putting out any statement about anything, don't use a black background and dark gray text. Like, you just made your statement hard to read. I just want to point that out. But back to the important stuff. So here's what they said. Yeah. Here's what
hate
they
that.
said in their statement. There is no place for racist content in our game. This is an effort we began with launch, and we need to do a better job. We're issuing thousands of daily bans of racist and hate-oriented names, but we know we have to do more, and we are. And then they list some bullet points of what they're doing specifically. Adding additional resources to monitor and ID racist content. Adding additional in-game reporting systems to increase the number of bans by hour. Adding filters and greater restrictions on name changes. Evaluating in-game improvements to make it easier to report offenses, and increasing permanent bans to root out repeat offenders. We apologize to our players. This is our commitment to you, our fans. Thank you. Now this statement was put out by Infinity Ward, not Activision. Real quick,
Yeah.
why is your effort to get rid of racist content in your games something that started with Modern Warfare?
Yeah, that is firstly weird. I guess though, if it's coming from Infinity Ward, it could have been just a bad wording because they're the ones working on Modern Warfare now.
But
But
if this
I don't know
effort
if that's a
began with
good enough excuse or not.
launch, like this is, unless they somehow see it.
Yeah, and obviously the effort didn't begin
Yeah.
with launch; it began today.
Yeah.
Or not whenever the day they posted
and like
that
to
was.
show
Yeah,
how
yesterday or
prevalent
whatever.
this is, if anyone goes on the Call of Duty subreddit and looks at like the top posts of the week, there is a post somebody went
Yeah,
through within Call of Duty or Activision's like app that lets you look up users, and they searched the N word, and it is insane how many accounts there were that were just that word, let alone that word with other things, like very horrible things. This is, yeah,
yeah.
it's
It's
a
just
very,
that's
very bad issue that it's just grossly negligent to,
there's just no way they could have missed it. Yeah, there's no,
yeah,
you don't miss that. I don't
yeah,
understand how you miss that. In the development stages, in the beta alpha stages, in the post launch stages, I don't know how you missed that many times. Unless
yeah.
it's
This is one of
almost
those
intentional.
things where personally I feel like them fixing the issue is nowhere near enough. They need to explain how this was allowed to happen for so long.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I agree with that. They need to do more, but it's Activision. I don't
No.
trust them to do more about anything.
I will say I wasn't
I
really going to
mean,
talk about
yeah,
this in the show because I wanted to look into it more. But apparently, the like board or shareholders or whatever are pissed at how much the CEO is making. Y'all realize you voted for his pay? Why are you like get?
yeah, that's a
He's a
little weird.
he should not be CEO of Activision. I personally feel like at this point, though I'm not an investor. If you have an issue with him,
I
deal with the
agree.
issue.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So,
Don't. Yeah,
we'll
whatever.
we'll
I
go
don't
ahead and
know.
move on to the next topic, though.
I don't play like I don't. This is
Yeah.
why I quit
I
Overwatch.
mean, I haven't since the Blitzchung situation, I have not played an Activision game. The only Activision game I was considering purchasing is Tony Hawk. And
Yeah,
with how Activision has been handling things since the Blitzchung situation, I find it very unlikely I'll be buying the Tony Hawk game.
yeah.
Yeah.
I know how excited
So,
you were for that.
EA, can you come out with
So
Skate?
it's
It's really sad
unfortunate.
that I'm asking EA to come out with a fucking game because Activision's fucking up so much. EA, hurry the fuck up and come out with Skate.
Yeah. I mean, Activision is just doing
Yeah,
publicly unacceptable things. I mean, EA has been doing stuff that's just, gross and kind of predatory, but not
correct. Yeah.
basically illegal, right? And it's just Activision, and the downfall of Blizzard by partnering with them. I wish Blizzard had just stayed separate, man. It's
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
disappointing to me. The merger has just the Blizzard doesn't exist
Correct, yeah.
anymore. They're in name only basically at that point.
So for our next
Yeah.
piece of news, this is another thing that was delayed. So Cyberpunk was planning on having their, I think it was called Night City Wire. Night City Wire, which was their news event, was originally scheduled for June 11th. They are moving it to June 25th, and again, their messaging is about ensuring that the voices that need to be heard right now can be heard. This was a pretty
Yeah.
big one that a lot of people were waiting for, and so I thought it was pretty important to share, especially since again, they specifically pointed out ensuring that the discussion needed to be had. And I mean,
Yeah,
makes sense. CD Projekt Red does a lot of very good things. They are one of the best developers and publishers in the industry, in my opinion. And
I agree
Cyberpunk
with that. Yeah, yeah.
as a game and a genre uh, is very inclusive by necessity. Like, that is a core point of the genre.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that is. So I think it's an important thing for
yeah.
them to take some form of action.
And then the next thing I wanted to talk about is Nintendo. Now, this was a very interesting one because they were the last of the major 3 gaming companies to put out a statement. And that to me wasn't really that surprising, because they're like, Sony is a very global company, and Sony's Interactive
Yeah.
Entertainment is headquartered in the United States, while Sony is a Japanese company. Um, so
Hmm.
they're very global. They have a much better perspective on the U.S., and their higher ups can look at and understand how to respond to things more directly because they just relate to it more. Um, Nintendo is an
Yeah.
extremely Japanese company, very Japanese culture. While they do have Nintendo of America, it is a little bit different of a situation for them. And so I was very interested to see if and how they would respond. And they did respond, and they did just put out a statement. And initially, to me, that was a little bit disappointing. But something that came out was that a Nintendo employee had tweeted, and they have since deleted this tweet, that Nintendo is actually double
Hmm.
matching any of the donations their employees make to the related organizations involving, the Black Lives Matter movement, and things like that. They have been double matching to these different civil rights movement organizations. And so, correct,
At
yeah.
least according
Which
to the tweet, right?
their
I don't
their
know if we
company
have
policy is to
information.
do matches anyway. But I believe double matching is more than what they
Okay.
normally do, from my understanding. When I had read into their policies, not recently, but before, I read into how their matching policy had worked, and it was they just did dollar for dollar matching. Whereas this was reported
Okay.
double matching, and so it seems like they are doing potentially more than normal, which is very good to hear.
Okay. And I mean, even if they're not doing more than
Correct,
normal, if
yeah.
that's the new normal, that's great.
And
So,
this
yeah.
leads me to something else I kind of wanted to mention, is where I feel like right now the best thing to do is give praise to the companies that we know are doing good. Um, and
Well, just like with COVID, when we talked about that so much, is
yeah,
keeping track of a
but
list, basically the companies that are actually
but
doing
what I want to
something that
get into,
matters.
yeah, with this is, give praise to the companies that we know are doing good. But unless they have done something like in Activision's case, where they have a history of, let's just say, not being nice to people that care about protesting and not actually giving a shit about racism on their platform, if they don't
Yes.
have that history and they just put out a PR statement, it doesn't mean that they aren't doing things. And even more than COVID, this is the type of situation companies are going to want to be very careful about, not looking like they're just doing something to profit off of. And so
That's true.
there
Yeah.
are situations where companies are doing things behind the scenes, or they are still working on things, and they might get announced later. And one specific example I want to state is American Express has they tweeted yesterday that they were donating $1 million to related organizations. And I know from people that I interact with that that was something that had actually been communicated to employees um, at least several days beforehand. And so it's one of those things where it
Okay.
was something that was already happening and already taking place days before it got announced to the public. And so, especially as we are so early on in this situation, I think it's important to just try and elevate and share the good that is being done, and not focus on what is not being done, because it helps those who are
Uh-huh.
doing good, and it doesn't hurt those who might be doing good in the background, or who might still be working on doing good.
And a lot of those places may come out
Correct.
after and talk about it, but just that
Correct.
they were trying to avoid the PR
And
portion of it, like you said, where they're not trying
yeah,
to
and
flaunt,
like,
look at us, look at us.
one example I like to use when discussing donations and stuff that sometimes are being kept private is that, a lot of people have issues with wealthy people and how they handle their money. One of the things with Steve Jobs when he was alive was that he never publicized his donations. He donated a lot of money,
Yeah.
but he always kept it private because he didn't want to make it seem like he was donating to help himself or donating to help his image. And so
Yeah.
while
Yep.
Steve Jobs had his issues and the employees had issues with him and stuff, like there are situations where things go on in the background. And so unless a company is actively making something worse, I think that it's best to just not really pay much attention to the companies that don't seem to be doing much and rather put the focus on those that are doing good, especially right now. There will be a time and a place to
Yeah.
discuss
Yeah.
when why didn't you do this thing. But right now I think we should be elevating those who do well.
I think I agree with
So
that. Yeah. And I mean, that's encouragement for companies that maybe
correct,
aren't
yeah.
doing something to do something, right? So it's that
Mhm.
people aren't mad about it, right? Is what I mean. Like sometimes when there's not that this should be controversial, but sometimes when there's controversial topics, right, companies are weary about doing the right thing because they don't want to damage their audience. And so praising them and showing them that, not necessarily praising them by buying stuff, but praising them, is going to help them understand that it's not
Correct, yeah.
going to damage the company. And this is something that, isn't controversial. So that's maybe a little bit less of a point with this one than some other instances, but still
It
I think
shouldn't
it's
be
important.
controversial. I wish it wasn't, but unfortunately that's not actually the case. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
the next thing we're going to talk about is something that Humble is doing, which is really amazing. So Humble has pled
Humble Bundle, just to be
correct.
clear for those that
They're
haven't
actually
heard
owned
of
by
them.
IGN now, so this is
Yeah,
actually something that IGN is doing through their Humble service.
yeah,
But Humble has pledged $1 million to fund helping publish games from Black developers. And this, you having mentioned, that this not being controversial and me saying that it is, kind of leads into this because I saw more that every single post about this has its unfortunate idiots tweeting stupid responses. But this one I saw a lot of specific hate on because they were specifically um, putting money towards Black developers. And so something that I wanted to discuss with that is that
hmm
this can actually be really meaningful in helping people understand what Black people go through in America, because games, like any other storytelling medium, they can be used to share these experiences. A lot of people have been suggesting books for people to read right now of people sharing experiences that they've gone through or sharing, documentaries and stuff.
yep,
One of the things that we really don't see in games, and in fact, while all of this had started going on a couple days ago, I had looked into it, and there is fucking like almost no games with Black main characters. It is very, very small. And
it's really
like, yeah,
rare. Yeah,
you have one of the three mains in GTA. That is probably the most prominent one. There was,
yeah,
Prototype 2. There's games here and there, but there's nothing major. And games can really be a good, and I feel like maybe one of the best storytelling mediums for helping people understand other people's experiences, because
well, it's one of the easiest to like for people to
Exactly.
really
You get
visualize and
more
grasp,
immersed, and if you
right?
get more
Yeah,
immersed, you
yeah,
kind of feel in that moment more like that person. One example that I want to use is Gone
yeah,
Home. For anyone that has not played that game, it's pretty short, it's cheap, highly recommend it. It's one of those games that kind of guides you through an experience that especially people that would watch this probably haven't directly had. As it is, in fact, I'm not going to spoil it. It's been out for a long time, but I want people to play and experience that game, because if you haven't, then I think
yeah,
that playing through that will do a good job of showing you how well games can be used to share other mindsets and really show why
yeah,
this can be very helpful and important. And I really appreciate what Humble is doing here.
yeah, yeah. Totally. I think it's a good move. It's not
Yeah,
just a donation. It's something that's harder to do. Right? Is
yeah,
more targeted in a good way. I mean, and I appreciate that. and something really quick that you made me think of that I wanted to touch on here as we're kind of going through what these various companies are doing. Kobo, which is owned by Rakuten, who owns a ton of stuff. I always pronounce their name wrong, but Kobo, the ebook company, has what you mentioned about books. There has been I don't know of anything else they're doing, but they're at least right now pushing
Mm-hmm.
books that are important to this subject and talk about the history of racism. You know, things like the new Jim Crow and stuff like that. And so that was something I wanted to throw in here too, because that is, you know, they're an e-reader company. They are a tech oriented company, and doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Something else to add to that list there, I guess.
Um,
So um, this next one really impressed me. Actually, I was pretty blown away by this. So Plex, for those that maybe don't know what it is, I know a lot of people do, but it's not incredibly popular. Plex is a home media server that you can install and use to store your movies, music, photos, stuff like that on it that you self-host on your own computer or server, and that it's a free project that you can download, and that's really why I wanted to emphasize this. It's something that you can freely download and use, and is pretty full featured. They do have a paid tier, to be clear, that does add features to it, features that they have to spend money on in order to get. But it's it's not expensive, and the majority, I would say, probably use it for free. And they donated $100,000. I don't know to what organizations in specific. In fact, let's see here if they say in the tweet. We are starting by pledging 100,000 to the Equal Justice Initiative and ACLU Racial Justice Program, and encourage you to support organizations peacefully committed to social justice. So, like that right there, from again a company that doesn't, I'm not going to say they're a poor company or anything, right? But they're not this massive company. It's pretty impressive to see a
yeah.
donation of that size
Yeah, and
from them.
especially since Plex is also in a weird situation where they're constantly at legal risk because their entire service ultimately relies on people using content that they, at a minimum, broke DRM to utilize, and in many cases pirated.
Yeah.
And so their
Yep.
entire
Yep.
business is always at some level of higher risk than many other companies. And so them putting up $100,000, of money they probably were holding on to for legal purposes, is very monumental, I
Yeah.
feel like.
I agree. I agree. And I'm glad that they're doing something. I think it's pretty impressive, and um, I guess that kind of concludes them because they didn't really give a
Yeah.
ton of details since it was
And then
just a
there's a couple
tweet.
other
But
companies I just wanted to share like their donation for like there's a lot of companies that have said a lot of things, but I'm
yeah,
just, as I was working on the doc today, I just had a couple companies I remembered had announced things, so I wanted to share those. Square Enix is donating $250,000 to a mix of organizations, and the Pokemon Company is donating $200,000. And then normally we wouldn't really cover much of what Lego does, but I just wanted to share this because it is
yeah,
so amazing. Like Lego announced that they are donating $4 million to a mix
yeah.
um, of organizations supporting Black children and then educating all children about racial equality. Um, and it's crazy. Lego is donating 4 times the amount of money that American Express is donating.
That's pretty amazing. And Lego is totally related, Daniel, because building PCs is
True.
Lego for adults. So it's
True.
completely related to what we do. And I was impressed by that. And they're also removing certain items from
Um,
shelves, right? But I don't
yes and
remember
no.
what.
So it wasn't that they were removing them from shelves. What they did was, especially for Blackout Tuesday, they asked they asked all of their companies that sell their products to not market
Ah,
um, specific Lego sets. So that was the White House Lego set,
okay.
and that was Lego sets that involved police officers. And so they essentially, specifically
Okay.
for Blackout Tuesday, wanted the focus to not be on any products that were essentially antagonizing the current situation. So
Okay. Okay. That makes sense. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure. I
yeah,
just remember reading a
there was a
small
lot
little
of
thing
mixed
about that. So,
information because it was coming from indirect sources, and Lego confirmed what they were doing later on. So
Okay. Okay, that makes
And then
sense.
the next thing, Linus from Linus Tech Tips is donating $20,000, which I was pretty surprised about because he's not even from the United
Me
States.
too. Well, and aside from that, not that Linus Tech Tips is
Mhm.
necessarily a small organization, but ad revenue
Yeah,
is like
yeah.
cut in half right
Now
now.
they do a lot of things to insulate themselves
So
from YouTube ad revenue. They're much more protected. Yeah.
absolutely, but it's still an
Um,
impact. Yeah, it's still potentially, in the I mean, we don't know their finances, but in the realm of like a 20% of
yeah.
what
Well, and
what they do. I know they make
he
it.
didn't say directly, but I'm pretty sure this is Linus's own money. This is not company money.
Yeah, I saw the tweet.
Because
Okay, okay,
this
that's
came
pretty impressive.
after Linus himself had made a tweet that a lot of people found to be fairly insensitive. It wasn't like anything specifically bad, but he made some jokes about like dating outside your race that kind of came across as just a little insensitive for the situation that's going on. And he was getting some flack for that, and then he
Okay, I
announced
see.
this. So I think he definitely didn't mean anything negative, and his tweet really wasn't negative. It just wasn't really what was needed in the
Hmm.
moment, and so people were like, "Dude, come on." And so he kind of
Yeah,
wanted
yeah.
to respond in a more meaningful way. So
Okay, that makes sense. Well, I'm glad he did something there. I was in the back of my head wondering what was gonna happen with him. So that's pretty impressive. And like you said, they're not even from our
yeah,
country, so that means something too. I mean, their core
yeah, but I
audience is
mean,
our
they
country,
also, I
but
mean,
still.
yes and no. I mean, like, no doubt they probably have most of their viewers from the U.S., but they do a lot of ads for or they at least used to do ads for like Canadian specific retailers. Like, I'm not talking just the ones
Oh,
that were
absolutely.
also in the
Yeah, yeah,
U.S.
they
I'm talking
do.
like not just straight up a Canadian company that has like just Canadian retail. So
Yeah, yeah, no,
they're
for sure, for
yeah,
sure. But
but
still, yeah, I know they have talked
oh
about how
yeah,
the majority of it is still
absolutely,
coming
yeah.
from the United States. Yeah.
So
Um. So this next section here, which kind of I put it in this section. It could have also been talked about in our security news section, but something that's happening due to the protests that are going on. That's something that maybe is kind of flying under people's noses, pun intended. Is spy plane surveillance. When I put spy plane in quotes, I mean we're not talking like drones and stuff, at least as far as we know, but they're manned planes that are used for doing like drug busts and stuff like that, and tracking drug cartels and stuff. So in specific, and this is like public flight record, so this is there's some stuff here that's a little bit more anecdotal and is not public flight record, but this first section here, we publicly know that they military had multiple RC-26B, which is actually an FBI primarily used plane, flying circles over the areas of protest. Now that plane is used for like I said, a lot of like drug busts and stuff like that, and drug cartel tracking and other stuff. So it's a surveillance plane, and it was flying circles over the protesters. So obviously, doing some level of surveillance, which if the helicopters from the news stations isn't enough, what is the government using this data for? And so like I said, some of it's held in public flight record. There's multiple places that we saw this plane or variants of it generally flying over areas, and then there's also been, this is a little bit more of the anecdotal section, is there's also been a lot of reports of planes being sighted, like seen flying around the protests that are not marked in the public flight record, which also makes you wonder
mhm.
what are those planes doing there, and are they owned by the government, or are they privatized? Either way, it means they turned off their transponder, so we can't track it at that point. So that's a little bit uneasy. I don't like it. And to add to it, and this is actually the one that bothers me more than just a plane that is more like visually tracking and spying on people, is there have been confirmed Cessna 172N, and I think there were a couple variants of it as well, that were flying over areas of heavy protest. Now that plane has been proven and is kind of commonly used for a device called a dirt box, and the purpose of that device is basically, and you've heard about them before. There's been some other names for them too, I think, but dirt box is what the security realm generally calls it. And they're devices that are designed to like trick your cell phones into connecting to them, but thinking that it's a cell tower. So then your phone is transmitting data through the Cessna plane and its antennas instead of through the proper cellular provider towers and stuff like that. And that information is then tracked and then it's relayed on, so you don't really ever know what's happening. If you were, potentially a network technician or something, you could, if you were looking for it, find it. But and that's how we know about this being a thing. But the general public, you're not even going to notice that there's anything different on your phone, and that information is being tracked. And a lot of the information that is transmitted from your phone is not encrypted and not end-to-end encrypted, especially. And so there's no, a lot of the information can be stored and tracked, and things like SMSs, which can be tracked and stored really easily, are bouncing through that, as well as phone calls. Now, potentially phone calls, voice over IP may help mitigate that. I'm actually not sure on that. But a lot of the newer, or not newer, but bigger cell providers are using VoIP for their service instead of old
Yeah, I have
analog,
to
so to speak.
imagine that like voice over LTE would run into issues with this. And then in addition,
Yes, yes.
if they are running the Dirtbox on these, then
Uh-huh.
T-Mobile might notice an increase in calls about service issues, because their lower band frequencies are required to use voice over LTE. And so if this is pulling the phone from reaching an actual T-Mobile tower initially, then people won't be connecting to those
Mm-hmm.
bands, and they're going to be getting.
Well, unless this was broadcasting those bands. I mean, if it's run by government organizations, we can't trust that they're following the
Well,
laws put
no.
in place by
So
the
what I'm getting at
FCC
though is like
for who can use what spectrum.
they would have to be. I mean, they potentially could be, but they would have to be doing a lot to essentially trick like voice over LTE and stuff. You cannot make calls on those bands not on voice over LTE. That's what I'm getting at. Yeah.
Right. Okay, yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, and I think at that point they would just not track that, but it would still
Correct.
just be voice over LTE at that point. Yeah. But it's still uneasing that it still really bothers me that they can, they're collecting this data, but they're also doing things like location tracking, and they can certainly track individual information about your phone so that they can determine who you were later if they don't know who that phone is registered to at that point in time. So that right there really
If you
bothers
are
me.
participating
I
in
don't
these
like.
protests, and especially if you are helping organize anything in these protests, it doesn't, if your
Yeah.
protests in your city are literally 100% always peaceful, you should still make sure that you are doing everything as far as organizing that you can through encrypted services. And in addition to that,
Yes.
you should not use biometric lock on your phone if you are attending these protests, because the government cannot compel you
Yes.
to type in your passcode. You can Fifth Amendment that. You
Yeah.
cannot do that with Face ID or fingerprint unlock.
Yes, and that's an important difference there. That was actually talked about, when the fingerprint sensors were first getting more popular, and is something to keep in mind. And then the recommendation from security experts is straight up just do not bring your phone or leave your phone in airplane mode. Airplane mode is no longer for being on the airplane.
Airplane
Mode
mode
is
is
for
for avoid.
protesting.
Yeah,
To
exactly.
avoid airplanes.
So
Yeah, exactly. And so, really, like, if you're going to the protest, put your phone on airplane mode, and if you need to make a call or something, turn it off of airplane mode, deal with that, and then turn it back on airplane mode. That would be ideal. My recommendation, there are some places recommending to just not bring your phone to a protest. My recommendation is to bring it in case of any
yeah,
kind of
well, and
emergency
then
that you
also,
need to
like,
deal
with
with.
everything that we've seen going on at these protests, we need as many cameras there as we can. We do.
Yeah, no, I think so. Yeah, for sure. So I think it'd be good to bring your phone, and potentially film things, take pictures. You are potentially at the risk of damaging the phone, running around with it and holding it out. And I'm not saying other people
Yeah.
damaging necessarily, but just dropping a higher risk of that when it's not in your pocket. But I think it's worth bringing the phone, but just do keep in mind, try
Yeah.
and put it in airplane mode. Tracking and this kind of privacy invasion is not okay, and we have more on that in the
Yeah.
security section. It's
Now,
unacceptable.
I wonder if there would be a good way to get like a mesh network set up temporarily for these types of protests. Yeah, so that
For
like
Wi-Fi?
people, like, because we've seen like some cities straight up like people within the city set up their own mesh network where one person will get really good internet and share that with the area. Yeah, and
It's
so like
totally possible. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
Unify makes
yeah, and so like
Ubiquity makes the year that could
I
do it.
wonder if like I mean I know we haven't seen it yet, but like I would love to see like a situation where somebody who has like a let's say for our example of the downtown Portland of like somebody that has an apartment in a convenient spot for doing that has access to really good internet, like just pre-set up equipment
Yeah.
so that in the case of protests downtown, they could quickly lay out a service. And obviously, if you're on somebody else's Wi-Fi, you should use a VPN and all that other stuff. But at least if
Oh,
you
for sure.
have
Yeah.
that network as a layer of protection, plus the VPN, plus encrypted services, makes it way harder for the government to
Yeah.
surveil
Yeah.
on things that
Yeah.
they should not be especially without a warrant. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Especially without a warrant, which is another thing that, as we know, the NSA is
Yeah.
collecting encrypted data. So that's unfortunate, but you can potentially avoid that by
Mhm.
bouncing it outside of the country. So, yeah, I mean, that's something that people could do. It would require a network technician, obviously, and then you would have to have, you would have to have the Wi-Fi points and repeaters and
Yeah.
stuff like that on different buildings and stuff. So the question I would have there is, are they going to do something where they can maybe mount things temporarily on the ground, because you can't just go around climbing buildings and
No,
putting
just be
your Wi-Fi
Spider-Man. Just be
equipment on it?
Spider-Man.
But it would definitely be interesting. It would just,
So
yeah, yeah, right. It would be
yeah.
interesting though. It would just take a lot of work, but
All right.
maybe we
So
will see
we'll
that
kind of
someday.
end this section and move on to we probably should have had that topic as the security section. But oh well, too late now.
Yeah.
So I'll talk about some content that I just want to share. The first one, and I feel like if you're gonna only look at one thing, this is a very long podcast. It's about 2 hours long, and it's very raw. It's unfiltered. There's a lot of emotion going on in this. This was recorded. I believe it was either really early this week or late last week. So especially when all of this stuff was even newer. Um, but there's a really good
Hmm.
podcast called Spawn on Me that is already worth a listen. But they did an episode. The name is A Lesson in Blackness, and they had several other black gaming content creators on to not talk really about gaming. I mean, they did talk a little bit about how, like one of the streamers that was on there, she talked about how there was like before she moved over to Twitch, there was essentially no black streamers on Mixer. Um, and like they talk about
Mm.
stuff like that. But it's really just them talking about what's going on and about how some of the stuff they've dealt with in their life pertaining to the systemic racism issues with police and things like that. And it's wild to hear. Like for us, like I've interacted with the cops once. What that wasn't like just me like saying hello or something to somebody that was walking by. There's been
Right. Right.
one
Right. Yeah.
interaction,
Yeah.
and that was when in middle school, me and a friend were driving electric motorcycles that were like the cheap little like toy ones, but that were faster than you could technically ride in the bike lane. And so we got pulled over to tell us that we couldn't do that.
Mm.
Whereas, so, they were talking about like, in one of the podcasts I was listening to, being pulled over like 3 times in the last 6 months for traffic stops that actually had nothing wrong. Like claiming a light was out that wasn't
Yeah.
out,
That's
that is clearly
ridiculous. Yeah.
verifiably not out. And it's like that type of thing is something that like
Yeah.
when it gets brought up, yeah, I know that occurs to them, but it's like one of those things that's like you don't realize how much of an issue it is until you hear them talk about it. And it's one of those things that because it's not something that we as white Americans really deal with. It's something that we need to kind of be reminded of regularly because it is such an issue and it is an ongoing issue. It's not something that,
Yeah.
this current protest is going to end. Um, there have
Right.
been
Right. No. Yeah.
changes we've
Absolutely.
seen pop up
It's.
at certain police departments in certain cities already, and there will likely be some kind of legislation that is bigger, but it's going to be a long ongoing issue. And so continual education and
Yeah.
continually being reminded about the stuff that they go through is important, and hearing it from black people that talk about this stuff is very important. Hearing again their emotions and their actual thoughts on it in detail from them is important. So I highly recommend this podcast. Um, it was very well done. It was a very interesting discussion. Go listen to it. In addition,
Totally. Yeah,
yeah.
that's one I need to
Um,
listen to as well.
in addition,
I haven't
Neil
done that
deGrasse
one yet.
Tyson put out a article called "Reflections on the Color of My Skin." That was very good, and MKBHD read that and responded to that with his own video called "Reflecting on the Color of My Skin," where he talks about his kind of perspective on things he's gone through, and he again, better to hear it from them. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just recommend go watch it. Yeah, it was interesting to
And
watch, and
then
I would just recommend you to go watch it.
the last one that I want to share, I feel really bad because I am probably going to mispronounce his name. There's a sneaker content creator. I don't know if it's, I think it's Jacques Slade is how it'd be pronounced. He put out a video called
Okay.
"The Burden of My Skin." And the tweet that accompanied it was actually him saying, let me actually pull it up. I want to make sure I get this right. Hang on. Um,
No worries. The dogs are barking right now. Anyway, I'm just gonna make a mark. So hold on.
Tell me when I'm good to.
Yeah, one sec. The dogs should be quiet in a second. I'm just waiting because I was having to mute and unmute my mic constantly.
So
Okay, go ahead.
yeah, the tweet that he put with it was the things I couldn't say, and you'll understand that when you watch the video. It is very emotional, very powerful, and just it's it wasn't what I expected when I clicked on it, but it's
Hmm.
it's something that's interesting to watch. So I just want to share some of those.
Definitely would recommend
Yeah,
all four of those. Yeah.
Marquez linked to a lot of other Black creators, and a lot of them have made content on the current situation. But something that he pointed out in his video, which again you should watch, but I want to make clear on this part, in this, it's just as we're talking about it, don't go to a bunch, especially on YouTube, where their algorithm can be really shitty for a lot of things. Don't go subscribe
Yeah.
to people that you do not intend to watch. If you want to go hear what they have to say, go watch their videos. And if you're not sure if you're going to watch them, don't subscribe to them yet, because YouTube actually, if you subscribe to someone and then don't ever watch their content, YouTube actually hurts that creator in their algorithm. And so,
Yeah. Which is unfortunate. It's not like people think of it as a form of showing
yeah.
support, and it does the
So
exact
just
opposite.
be mindful of that as you go to subscribe to things. And this is independent of this issue. It's actually something that people should keep in mind, because like every once in a while I'll go through my subscription
Yeah.
list and I'll unsub from people that I don't watch regularly. Because if their
Yeah.
videos are something that I'll want to watch, eventually YouTube will recommend it or I'll come across it in another way. But I don't want to hurt the channel by being
Yeah.
subscribed to them when I'm not watching their content.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. So now we can move on into the security section here, and this was some of the surveillance things we talked about were definitely related to this. But I wanted to touch on a few specific things. So the first one here is there's a lot of things that are kind of going under our noses as stuff like this happens. And I mean, just any big public event, the government oftentimes tries to push things through. And I'm not here to talk about any of that I don't understand. What I am here to talk about is things related to encryption that have been talked about recently and kind of almost forgotten. So I just wanted to touch on the fact that the executive order to modify Section 230 is still trying to be pushed through. Now, that it's probably not going to get through, but it's definitely something that I think people need to pay attention to. And that right there is, we talked about it a lot in our last podcast. I would recommend watching that last podcast, or if you want to, you can go watch the clip that we have specifically of this. But it's we talked about it in a ton of detail, and in fact, Daniel actually had more information on it than me. But it's very damaging to the internet and website owners as a whole. It affects their liability for content that happens on their site, which is something there's been liability protection laws in place for that, and this
Yeah, so
makes
essentially
modifications
Section
to that can
230,
damage
as it
things.
has stood for the entirety of the internet since they started regulating it, has been fundamental to ensuring that sites with user-generated content are not liable for the content their users post. This is not stating that Twitter is
Yeah.
immune from all liability. If Twitter puts out something themselves that is considered libel, they could still be sued and still be liable for that libel.
Yeah.
Whereas if I post something on Twitter that would be lawsuit worthy, that lawsuit would not be on Twitter. That would be on me for putting out that content. And so that is what Section
Yes.
230
Yes.
has and is fundamentally about. And this attempt to tie those liability protections to other aspects of the bill, but then give the control over whether or not they would meet those qualifications to the FCC is a very fundamental change to it, and would essentially give whatever
It's
executive
huge.
and power at the time the ability to dictate which sites could get sued for user content and which sites couldn't, which pretty much means any president at any given time could practically destroy the way that any given site operates.
Yeah, and
So,
that's disturbing. These kind of protections need to be in place, and it's kind of core to me because I run a website, I post content on YouTube, and it could damage sites like that. It can even damage sites like, cloud storage sites and stuff. So there's a lot more detail. I'll put the link in the description. There's a lot more detail in our full clip about it. So either that or just go watch our previous WordCast, which talks about it along with a bunch of other stuff. But it's a big deal. And to kind of add to that, the Earn It Act, which is another thing that I think is kind of not being talked about, but is still trying to be pushed through. And this is somewhat separate from Section 230. This is not the executive order. This has been going on for a while. Is basically, you can almost think of it as like they're trying to kind of end encryption, right? So the idea here is required backdoors to encryption, and there's a lot of information to digest from this. So this was more so just a reminder, not a full deep dive into it. However, there will be a link that I'll put in the description that kind of goes to more information about it from the
one thing I
EFF.
wanted to share as well, pertaining to the EFF and to this, they did an AMA yesterday about the Earn It Act. I actually hadn't seen it until.
Oh, I hadn't run across that yet either. That's good. That's good information to have. So I'll link that as well. And for those that are listening to just the audio only version of this on various sites, if you go to our channel, you can just look up WordTech on YouTube. That's where all these description information will go, because I know some
they also
podcast services don't have the description
it
info.
sounds like take questions on Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act and stuff as well in there. So yeah,
Yeah, I've got a lot to read
I
through
had
there.
only
That's
seen
very
this as we
interesting.
were filling
Okay.
out the doc, and so I didn't have time to go through it. But since we're talking about the Earn It Act,
Okay.
especially, I figured I'd throw that in there.
Yeah, I just I'm gonna save that and send that to my e-reader and read that tonight. Okay, yeah. So that's and so really, like I said, this is not a deep dive into either of those things. The Earn It Act affects your privacy because it affects encryption, it affects end-to-end encryption, and basically makes it a lot less secure, as well as tracking your information. And it's very anti-privacy, and I don't like to see stuff like that going on, especially in a place that's supposed to be for privacy, right? So it's very unfortunate, and I guess the point I want people to take out of this is not by any means to diminish what's going on right now and how important that is, but let's also not forget about other things that are happening. And when the bigger issues come up, things kind of get brushed under, so that it's easier for the government to push things through without us noticing. And I think it's just really important to still pay attention to those things, and be aware that they're happening. And the same exact thing happened when the pandemic started, right? Was these things started being pushed through, kind of hoping that nobody would notice. So just a friendly reminder to pay attention to other things that are going on, and those are by no means the only two things going on. Those are two specifically related to security that are going on, though. So this one was just kind of a funny thing. This is a fairly quick little bit, but the UK has been found using Google Ads to try and prevent cybercrime, which sounds weird. How do you advertise to prevent cybercrime? And it was not like advertising like their agencies that help prevent it. The idea of it was to use advertisements to actually attempt to prevent the crime from happening. And what was interesting is well, there's a couple interesting points here actually. So one of the specific ad titles, and we've seen other ones, but it's been a little hard to track because Google ads are so mixed, right? And these were not like visual ads; these are ads on Google search specifically. But it was, quote, gaming and cyber crime hyphen booting is illegal, end quote. Now, booting, for those that don't know, is it's means DDoS attack. Basically, it's a DDoS for hire. So a DDoS is distributed denial of service, and what that means is basically one way or another flooding enough traffic to a device to take down a service on the internet. And DDoS for hire services have been a big problem, where for a surprisingly little amount of money, in some instances, you can take down fairly large websites, or especially small websites for not very much money. And that's obviously highly illegal and a bad cybercrime to damage somebody's business or property by using a DDoS for hire service. And so it was interesting to see this. And another point that was actually brought up by Brian Krebs on this topic was that they are competing with ads that are for booting, which is just weird. It was a weird thing to think about. So I'm trying to think of how to describe this. So Google, I run Google ads. That's one of the things I do as a profession. And Google's algorithm is going to push things based on keywords, and you can define those keywords. And booting is definitely going to be one of those keywords that DDoS for hire service would actually use to promote stuff. And you may be wondering, well, how can they promote that on Google? And it's not that Google's okay with illegal things being promoted, but that it's just really hard to track that in a lot of cases. They can't just ban this keyword in specific, so to speak. And so it's kind of weird to see that there's almost two things happening at once here. There's the advertisement of the visual of, showing up this ad instead of an ad for a DDoS for hire service. If somebody is Google searching for a DDoS for hire service, they may see this as a reminder that that is not okay.
Yeah.
So I just thought it was an interesting way to deal with it.
Depending on how much money they're putting into this, if they're competing with ads for those services, they could be increasing the cost to those services some, which increased the price of those services, which makes them less and less compelling. Now, I doubt it's any monumental dollar amount in the grand scheme of things. But I mean,
Probably
even if
not,
it stops a person here and a person there from doing it, from that side, and then in addition, it also again reminds people that it's illegal. It's like it's winning on multiple fronts in small amounts here, small amounts there.
Yeah, absolutely. And their target audience with this was teens in specific, is trying to prevent people that maybe wouldn't know any better, and would think it's funny.
Yeah,
or
I mean, I
whatever
know
to do
people
something like
when
this.
back in
That's not
high
okay.
school doing Modern Warfare 2 that would use like Cain and Abel to get IPs from Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 and used a booting tool to boot people offline so that we'd get hosts and shit like that.
Yep.
No.
That was not that uncommon. So, and it's getting harder and harder to do that stuff, but people also don't realize how illegal it is, right? So I think it's an interesting way to deal with it. So this one, Zoom is a service we talked about before, and we talked about their various security issues. We've also talked about how they've mitigated those security issues and actually done a surprisingly good job of dealing with problems that they had. As well as mentioning that they do have a more secure version of it that's actually considered to be HIPAA compliant. It's expensive, but it exists, and that's the one. If you want the best privacy, is definitely the one to use. However, that is sort of changing now. The HIPAA one is still going to be the best privacy because it's also protected by that law. But Zoom is working on, it's not available yet, but they are working on end-to-end encryption for their paid services. Now, there doesn't seem to be a lot of description of exactly which tiers of paid service that is, so it may not be the lowest tier, but it's definitely going to be the business tiers. They specifically talked about company run Zoom accounts, so that would include, of course, also the medical additions for HIPAA compliance and stuff like that, which I don't know the back end, so I don't know if their current HIPAA compliant one is end-to-end encrypted, but they're adding that. And so what that means is Zoom conversations have always been encrypted. Of course, that's kind of a given. On the internet, you should just encrypt basically everything. But what in specific is happening here is end-to-end encryption, which means there's no middle ground where Zoom can harvest that data. It's transmitted from you, and there's essentially, obviously, there's essentially a guarantee that it's secure. Now, obviously, as a security professional and as a network technician, you always should assume that everything is compromised always, because that's going to give you the best mindset around security of how many mitigations can we put in place, instead of just, oh well, it's probably fine, right? But it's still a comforting thing that they're going to be working on adding this. But you may have heard the little bit there that I said about paid users and which tier. So that is correct. The free users are still not going to have end-to-end encryption. And the speculation around that would probably be that they're trying to sell that information to the government, and tracking you for that
or
kind of
to
stuff.
or to
But you don't have
lower
to guess
costs
anymore.
on servers or whatever.
Right? Yes, yes, yes. And it's like, okay, so but you don't have to guess anymore, because it was literally said, and this is by the CEO, I think is his title. Free users, for sure, we don't want to give that, because we also want to work together with the FBI, with local law enforcement, in case some people use Zoom for a bad purpose. That is a direct quote. So yes, they are working with the U.S. government and stuff like that to, and again, potentially other places in the world, their law enforcement, when Zoom is used for potentially illegal acts. Now, of course, you can go, well, people can buy a Zoom account, but when you purchase a Zoom account, it is going to be more difficult to, well, first off, you have to pay something for it, but it is also more difficult to do that in as anonymous way as you would have
Yeah,
using a
but
free
the
account.
thing that I want
And
to point out too, though, is
because
if you are using it for let's talk about the things that they are actually under flack for, which is things like child pornography and stuff. Child pornography rings
yes,
are generally pretty massive and have a lot of money involved. And so if it's an inconvenience to sign up as a paid account, they will find a way to do that in a way that they need to, if it's going to give them the encryption.
but it does make it more difficult for smaller. So it does help it's a level of prevention. I mean, it's just it's hard. Where's the balance, right,
I mean,
between
at that
security and
point, though, I feel like
surveillance,
they should
right?
just
And
they should just do something to make sure that it's legitimate people signing up, rather than even for the free service, rather than
yeah, yeah.
essentially working with the FBI and not handling security properly for everyone else.
Yeah, yeah, I suppose it's a little bit of a weird statement, and I'd be interested as this gets implemented to understand more of their privacy policies around it in specific, and maybe
Yeah.
read through their privacy policy after I'm sure
Really,
it's going to be updated, to see what is and isn't tracked. Because this also, basically to me, what this statement meant was not so much, oh, they're working with law enforcement to protect us. It was more of, yes, we
yeah.
harvest your data. It was
Really what
a
it comes down
confirmation to me
to,
that they
I
harvest your
think,
data
like,
and
this
use
is
it for
just my
stuff.
opinion, but separate from the security and privacy issues that have come up in the news as of recent, as it became really big, Zoom has gotten a lot of flack
Yes.
for being used for illegal activity. And they want an out. They want a way to
Yeah.
say, no, we are working with law enforcement, and we are whatever, so that investors don't get scared by that. That is really, to me, what seems like the most likely
Right.
scenario as to why they are doing it and why they said it this way. Because ultimately they're talking on an investor call. They can't legally lie about why they're doing it to investors. And since they said that they are doing it to work
Yeah.
together with the FBI and law enforcement, in case people use Zoom for a bad purpose, that tells me that that's why they're doing it. And since they have taken flack for that,
Hmm.
it seems like it's their um, both their out, but also their way of handling it with minimal work.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
I just I think
I
that
think I agree with
the
that. But the end all is I am glad that
yes,
end-to-end
I am
encryption
glad
is
about
being
that
added though,
too.
for
I
sure.
just think that it should be
Like
added
that result's good.
system wide. I don't think it should be a paid only feature.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, my preference would definitely be everything end-to-end encrypted everywhere.
Zoom got that
But
investment money
of
from the
course we need
stock
to.
increases.
Yes, yes, right, right, exactly. So, and I presume, I mean, it's hard to know what data is or isn't being used for, and that's the benefit of true end-to-end encryption is
Yeah.
Zoom doesn't have access to your data, so they cannot use that. Um, but we'll see what comes of it, I guess. So another interesting one, and this is security news, but it could be considered just tech news in general. Has been an update to Firefox. Firefox 77 is now available. Favorite number, so kind of cool to run across that. But Firefox 77 is now out. There's it's a few different bug fixes and security fixes. I'm not going to go into incredible detail because they're annoyingly complex and you should go read about them yourself if you're interested. But Firefox 77 is available and fixes 2 different memory management bugs. So that's not security related. At least we don't think it was. But there's not a lot of specifics on what those memory management bugs were. And then the other part is they have patched a timing attack on digital signature algorithms in the Network Security Services Library. Now, for those that don't understand what that means, basically they patched something that would potentially allow attackers to kind of get part of the encryption key from something. And this is what's called a timing attack. And the idea of a timing attack is basically you have an algorithm and you can guess what numbers are being used by how long it takes to process on a specific performance system, right? And so, a good analogy may be doing like, having somebody do a math problem for you. And that math problem is, if they give you an easy math problem versus a very complicated math problem, but say the person that's telling you to do the math problem is not the person that's guessing what the numbers being used in that problem were. There's a third party that's guessing that. If that third party is asked, hey, what do you think the numbers that were being used are, the person's going to have a little bit of an idea if it took you 20 minutes to figure out something versus taking you 5 minutes to figure out something or 30 seconds to figure out something. They can take a guess that the easier mathematical problems are the ones that are going to take less time to figure out. And that's kind of the way timing attacks work. And you may actually kind of link this up to some of the CPU microcode issues with like Spectre and Meltdown that we've talked about, which are in some ways similar. There's been some of those microcode issues that are effectively a timing attack. And so it's good to see mitigation of this, but it is also, we see a lot of headlines about this kind of stuff, and realistically, it's very hard to execute. The bigger concern is having other vulnerabilities that kind of line up with this, and this gives you an idea that may help you with other vulnerabilities that you find to really get the full encryption key and be able to decrypt the data that's being used in Firefox. It's a very high-level, complicated topic, but it's good to see a patch for it, basically. It's good to see that they found it and they patched it, but that's as far as I'm going to go at this point with that. And then the last security news topic here, you may have seen headlines going around, and I kind of actually wanted to correct it in a way, but also talk about how it could be concerning if true. So you may have seen that NASA has potentially been affected by ransomware. And there were various headlines going around that were kind of similar to that. And I just want to correct that first off, there's no confirmation of that. It's, we probably wouldn't find out for a long time if it was true, but there is definitely no confirmation as of right now that they are affected. And there's no confirmation that SpaceX in conjunction with NASA is affected by this. SpaceX is a separate entity despite them working together on things. But the Doppelpaymer ransomware group has publicly stated that it successfully breached NASA's air gap, basically because they successfully breached the IT contractor Digital Management Inc. that NASA tends to work with. And Digital Management Inc. also works with a whole bunch of other companies in the top Fortune 100. Now, whether or not it's true that they actually managed to get into digital management, we don't even know. Again, this is a claim. There's not a lot of confirmation around it. But even if they did, there's no guarantee that that was then taken into NASA or potentially given over to SpaceX in any way. And so I just wanted to make that clear that I don't think there's a lot to worry about right now with the security protocols that are put in place with things like this that are so important, that are air gapped. It's, I think, pretty unlikely that they wouldn't have known about it before going into NASA's facilities, but it's also a story to kind of continually watch to see if anything comes of this or if it was just fluff. Yeah.
I don't really have much to add to that. It's interesting, but we kind of just have to wait and see.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like there's not a lot more to say because there's nothing confirmed. So we just have to wait and see if anything else comes of that. But I hope that they are lying, or that that digital management figured it out ahead of time and was able to mitigate it and deal with it before anything happened. We haven't heard anything as far as I know from digital management directly, so at this point, I don't know. So now we're kind of moving on into our like other topics, and there's just a few things that we have to cover here. It's nothing major, but various topics here. So I'll let you take the lead with the one about CES, because that one was not one that
this
I've
is interesting.
followed as
So
closely
this
as you.
actually is not new news, but nobody noticed it because nobody gave any thought to CES. But apparently back on May
Yeah,
7th, they announced on their website that the 2021 CES would be happening in person again. Somebody at The Verge noticed it like yesterday and wrote an article about it, and then like everyone started talking about it because they thought it was new, and then the people organizing CS were like, no, we put that up on the 7th of May, dude. um but yeah,
yeah,
so they're
yeah.
planning on having like an in-person event as well as some digital stuff, which they act like that's new, but like it's not really. That's kind of just how CES works.
That's kind of how
um
CES always is. Yeah, they're
but
advertising it weirdly.
this is wild because like the best guess estimate for a vaccine is September for healthcare workers and early next year for starting to get it to other people at best. Like
Yeah,
that is the most optimistic scenario. Um, there is
yeah,
just
yeah.
about no way that a 100,000 plus person from all over the world event is going to happen in person. Um,
No, no, and I want to emphasize here too that CES was, reported after more studies to be one of the cesspools of what made this outbreak
yeah,
so bad in the United States. Obviously,
it's
there's a lot of other things playing in that,
it's
but
no longer
CES
the
meetup was a
Consumer
big
Electronics
deal.
Show. It's the Coronavirus Exposure Show.
Oh man, that was a quick. That was a. There was no cuts there.
it's
That was raw.
it's just it's so bad. Like um I just don't get how they think that this is going to happen, and like they're putting companies in
Yeah,
a tough spot too, because if they were just doing a digital event, then because like companies plan for this stuff 6 months in advance. That's now. 6 months
yeah,
from now is
yeah,
January
yeah, yeah.
when the event,
Exactly.
or December, which is like right before the event happens. So like these companies need to be planning what they're
Yeah,
doing soon. And if you're a smaller company, you
yeah.
can't afford to plan a physical event that you know is probably going to be canceled or that you know isn't going to be safe.
Yeah, so at that point you're just like
Yeah.
not gonna go. Yeah, yeah. It's like, what the hell are they thinking? I don't
Yeah. And
understand what
so
the
if they
organizers are
say,
thinking here.
like, oh, we'll do some digital stuff too, it's like, no, you need to tell them now what that's going to look like so they can plan for it or plan to say, screw you, we're going to do our own thing.
Yeah,
And in
absolutely,
addition to that,
absolutely.
there's not going to be the type of media coverage you would normally see at CES. So we already have Austin Evans and MKBHD indicating they won't be going, as well as Linus saying that he will definitely not be attending, and his team will not attend unless they are vaccinated, and even then they have to choose to do it. They will not be, like, normally that is part of their
Yeah,
job. Yeah,
not
in this
obligated.
case, it's like, no,
Yeah,
even if you're vaccinated, it's optional because vaccines aren't 100% effective. It's especially when the virus is still
yeah,
massively spreading, and at an event like that, that's a fucking terrible idea. And then the other
yeah.
big thing is
It's
that
really
the
bad.
editor-in-chief of The Verge, Nilay Patel, he's indicated that The Verge is already not planning on going for next year too. So now you also have a major tech
So that's
publication
you've
and
already
multiple major YouTubers.
a lot of major tech. Yeah, yeah, that's already ruining a lot of the event coverage of things that are there in like the YouTubers and the media and stuff. The media in general are the people that are oftentimes covering stuff that isn't broadcast by CES themselves, right? And so that
Yeah,
stuff's just not going
at
to get
that
out
point,
there
the only
because
benefit to
nobody's
CES
talking
for
about
a
it.
lot of attendees would be to try and get investors. And quite frankly, we can figure out other shows and other ways to
Yes,
do that. We don't need to put people at risk.
absolutely. And we're gonna see more and more people that are
Yeah,
just haven't said that they're not
especially
going,
since this
but
came out of
that
nowhere.
are
Like it was
definitely not
something that,
going.
again, the Verge only broke the story like yesterday, and it was something that like has
Yeah.
just been flying under the radar for a bit. Um,
Well, nobody was like, I
Yeah,
wonder if
I
CES is
have to
happening, because
imagine,
the
you know,
assumption
like
was no.
CNET and TechCrunch and stuff just assumed it would be canceled.
Yeah, yeah, I would. I mean,
Yeah,
that's what I would assume. That's what we assumed.
like
Like, it
Microsoft
just didn't
has,
make sense. And they can still do
yeah,
it as a
like
virtual event. That's still something they could work on organizing. They have enough time to help the smaller businesses that want to
yeah.
do it to be able to do it virtually, right? But they're not focusing
Like,
on
there's a
that,
reason
and
that
it's like, what are you
Microsoft has
doing?
announced that they will not be doing any in-person events until at least July of next year. Because again,
Yeah,
even
yeah,
even if the
it's
vaccine is out
crazy.
enough that you can get all of your employees vaccinated, if if it's
It's
99.9% effective and you have a large ass company, that still leaves room for you to accidentally send some of your employees that could potentially get infected to an
yes.
event where the virus will probably be spreading significantly.
Right, yeah, that's the exact other part, is even if you can get all your employees safe, and even if it's 100% effective, there's no guarantee that they're not helping spread it to people that don't have that
Yeah.
vaccine in that area, right? You know, you can still carry the virus for a short period of time by just touching stuff, and if there are people there that aren't vaccinated, you're
Yeah.
putting them at risk,
It's
you're
a
putting their
wild
lives at risk.
situation. I can't believe that they're
Yeah.
still trying to go through with it.
I hope something changes about this soon, because that
Yeah.
just doesn't make any
Yeah,
logical
absolutely.
sense to me, honestly. It's just
Yeah.
completely crazy. It's kind of
And
ludicrous.
then for the next topic, there's two different SpaceX launches we want to talk about. The first and the biggest one is the Demo 2 mission. So this
Yeah.
is their manned mission that was done um, Saturday.
Made Yeah, it
Yeah,
was Saturday, and it made history. I mean, I'm gonna be honest, I
yeah,
cried a little bit when it was
it was great to
successful.
see. It was so for those that don't know, this is the first
Yeah,
manned mission to the ISS from U.S. soil in 9 years. In addition to that, and yeah,
already a feat in
and more
itself.
importantly, it's the first launched manned mission to orbit, let alone to the ISS. Both of those were achieved in the same launch from a commercial company for the first time.
Yeah, yeah,
So that's
absolutely
a really
amazing.
big deal.
It's a lot.
And we don't know exactly when the mission is going to end. It's an undetermined amount of time. Realistically, what they're planning on doing is ending it close to when SpaceX does their next manned launch. And that will be their first, what is
Hmm.
considered their first like full mission. Again, this was just a demo mission. This was testing things.
It was to get
Correct, yeah.
certification from
But
NASA, right?
they
Was
didn't
kind of the
want
idea.
to just
Yeah,
send
yeah,
people up there for 2 weeks. Like originally, that was actually the plan. But they ultimately decided that it made more
yeah.
sense, especially since Boeing is also pretty far behind on their goal. It made more sense to send them up there for a
Hmm.
longer period of time to just better utilize the ISS and get more use out of it while they can.
Well, yeah, do some actual work for the amount of money
Yeah,
put in
because
play to
originally
launch
the
something
idea
like
would
this.
be that
Yeah,
they, you know, originally the SpaceX and the Boeing launches both were going to happen sooner, and they were both closer to each other. And so I think the idea was you
yeah,
launch this mission first, or you know, whichever mission's ready first. They do some work up there for a couple weeks. They land safely. The next mission launches from the next person. They do some work for a couple weeks. They land safely, and then you launch the first real mission. And you know, it keeps that constant flow.
yeah,
But since Boeing is, you know, behind schedule seemingly pretty far, and SpaceX needs time to prep and, you know, get the first full non-demo Dragon capsule ready. Um, and then obviously, you know, all the inspections and all
yeah,
the other stuff that goes along with that, figuring out or, you know, finishing training their next crew for that mission, all of that. Um, and so with that, it's going to take time, and they just want to have these guys on there for longer. I've seen it could potentially be um,
yeah.
as little as a month to as many as like 3 potentially. So
Yeah, it
yeah,
depends on preparation time and stuff. So I think that's cool, and I'm really glad that it was a success. And I just hope the return is a success. You know, that's the more dangerous portion of
yeah,
it.
that's going to
So
be a really big deal. I will
yeah,
definitely be watching that live.
yeah. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I don't care what time that's at.
yeah,
Just like with this one, I will watch it live. This
yeah,
one was at a nice time for me, but but even if
yeah.
it's middle of the night, I'm gonna watch that
And
one.
then the other SpaceX launch
Yeah,
that happened shortly after, which was actually originally scheduled to happen beforehand but got delayed because of weather, was their Starlink
yeah,
launch. So This puts them at a total of just about 480 satellites in space for Starlink. And in order for them to
Hmm.
get moderate US coverage, they need about 800 total. So they are getting there. Each launch is about 60 per. Yeah.
Getting close,
So,
man.
we'll be looking at 540 the
Yeah.
next one, 600 the next one. It'll only be, what, six, seven launches, depending on exactly how many sats they have up and how many they might want to replace or test things with.
Yeah.
Um, but they are
Yep.
approaching the ability to have at least some US coverage. And again, initially it's going to focus on like rural areas and stuff after the very initial testing. But we'll see how it goes. I'm very
Hmm.
excited for this to do well. Um, and again, I know a lot of times when this gets brought up, everyone just complains about how it affects astronomy, and that is an issue. But SpaceX is doing a lot to handle that in a number of different ways.
Yeah.
And right now,
And to be clear, it primarily is affecting
well,
smaller
and then
astronomy
in
groups,
addition,
not as
right
much as the
now it
big
is a
ones.
bigger issue at um, before the satellite's orbit raise, and therefore like shortly after launch. So since this just recently launched, I'm sure
Yeah.
this week we'll see complaints about it again, um, at a greater number than we've seen over the last month or two since the previous launch, because the satellites are in a much more
Hmm.
visible and lower position right after launch. Um, and then they raise up, and
Right.
they've done
Right.
some
Yeah,
things.
that's true.
They're testing different paint configurations to reduce light reflectivity. They're testing different angles and things like that.
Yeah.
They're doing things to ensure that that is less of an issue. And eventually, the current satellites that haven't been modified to reduce that will also be replaced. And so it will be a growingly less and less issue as time goes on.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I'm just excited to see how the Starlink performs. I'm definitely going to do everything I can to be as early of an adopter as possible, and I will be testing that and definitely making video content on that because I'm excited to see if this is actually going to be a
Yeah.
viable option for people or not, and if it can scale to the performance that we really would like to see. Because in my opinion, everybody should have access to synchronous gigabit for cheap. Here,
Yeah.
well, worldwide. I'd like the internet like that worldwide. Um, so one of the other smaller topics, but I'm very, very, very excited for, being a big fan of Elite Dangerous. It's been talked about for a really long time. The Elite Dangerous was going to eventually get space legs, as they call it, which is basically the ability to get out of your spaceship and then get out of any vehicles. So back with the Horizons update, and I think it was 2015, they added the ability to actually land on a planet and deploy a vehicle and drive around and do various missions on the planet with the vehicle, which was really cool. And I adore this game. I find it to be so fun. And I bought a HOTAS just to play it and stuff. It's an amazing space simulator game. But people have been wanting more. They've been wanting it to be more along the lines of what Star Citizen is trying to do, where you can actually run around and shoot and stuff like that. And that is exactly what they are going to be adding with the Odyssey update, Odyssey expansion, I guess I should call it. So it's probably going to be paid by that terminology, just so you guys know it's going to cost something, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was $60. But you'll actually be able to get off your ship and get in an SRV, which is the land vehicles, get out of the SRV, walk around, do missions on foot, and actually like have like loadouts, weapons, everything that you could imagine that you would kind of want in a game like this. And actually be able to do, first person shooter type missions. And whether or not there will be PvP with it, I imagine there probably will be in some form, because there is exactly that with spaceflight. But it's really exciting to see this. This is something I've really wanted to do for a long time, and I'm definitely going to be getting back into the game. It's been a while since I've played it a lot, to kind of participate in this update or this
Mhm.
expansion as it goes along. And if I can get beta access, I will definitely
Yeah,
do
that'll
that.
be really interesting. For those that play this game primarily in VR, it doesn't support VR, at least initially. So that will be something to
Yes.
keep in mind. We'll see how they kind of adapt to that. I don't think they've gone into much detail as to how they'll handle like ensuring that VR players don't have a bad experience from if they own this DLC. Um,
Because I think Elite Dangerous has been one of the best VR style games to play, for sure. It's one
yeah,
that I would like recommend. Um, yeah, so I don't want them to damage
yeah,
that
absolutely.
with this too much.
And then the last topic of the show is EA bringing more and more stuff to Steam, which is very interesting. Um, Yeah,
I was
so
very
EA
surprised by
has
that.
their own
Yeah.
store, yet they're actually moving games from just being on their store to being more and more so on Steam. They have actually done this already with I think Star Wars was on Steam, the newest Star Wars game. Um, but they
Yes,
are
yes, it was. That's
bringing.
correct.
They brought over Dragon Age Inquisition, Mirror's Edge Catalyst, a couple Fast and Furious games, and more over. But what's even more interesting is that they're actually bringing EA Access, their subscription service, to Steam. So if you want EA Origin Access,
Okay,
you
that's
no longer
surprising.
have to have Origin.
And I mean, Origin was the best launcher ever, so I'm kind of disappointed.
Origin's trash and all, but like
Yeah.
the thing for me is like, does Steam need to get bigger?
Competition of these. Yeah, no, that's another topic for sure. Is I agree. Steam doesn't need to grow in size. Unified. The thing is, a single place for that kind of stuff is good for consumers, but not necessarily good in the long run for consumers. It's good visually and
Which is why I
organizationally for
personally I
consumers,
like the
but
approach of having more services that could operate like the GOG Galaxy beta, where they can be
yes,
that way. Oh, it is?
it's out of beta.
Okay, I didn't know that. Um,
Yeah, yeah, they
but
pulled it out of beta.
where
It's fully
okay, so with
available.
GOG Galaxy then, where you can have access to all of your games on all of these different services, and like an easy way to
Yes,
yeah,
and
and like an
friends
easy way
lists
to
and
launch the
everything. Yeah.
store for any given service, but that way, like, you're accessing the games that you own all through one tool to make it easy, and it pulls the data from those other services so that it's not like you have to manually add each game like you would on Steam. Um,
Yeah, it's just like linking an account like you would
yeah,
with
and
emails or
I think
something
that
like
that
that.
is the better way to handle that issue. Obviously, Steam, their priority is less so that and more so selling more product because that's what they do.
Right. Right,
Um,
right, exactly. And yeah, I've loved using GOG Galaxy 2.0. That's something I've been using quite a
yeah,
bit, and it works really well. So I'd highly recommend anybody that wants to is try it out, give it a shot. It's really
yeah.
nice and pretty intuitive. But yeah, I mean, it's weird to see EA doing it, but I would like EA to just offer their games on more platforms. Period. It's not like they're not available on Origin, but are on Steam. They're still available on Origin as well, correct?
Yeah, but I
I
wonder
assume
if we're
so.
gonna see like a downscaling of Origin. Um,
It could happen, yeah. I mean, Origin's been trashed. There has been other, third-party launchers that are more okay. Well, when I say third-party, I just mean other launchers. Like, I don't like Activision Blizzard, but their launcher is actually really, really great. It's, it's not that invasive. It does a good job of actually not crashing and having problems and letting you, repair games and everything. And Origin has never been that great at that. Epic Game Store is another one that just has it's had its ups and downs, right? And this is aside from Epic, the company, or any way that you feel about any of that. The launcher itself has not been
yeah.
the greatest in
To
terms
be
of
fair, it's
stability, in
about the
terms of performance
newest
impact on your
actual
PC.
launcher on the market.
It is, and they've fixed a lot of that. But like,
Oh,
I still close the Epic Games launcher
yeah, you definitely
when I'm in
should.
game because it's
Even
crash games
even
for me
for
and
most
stuff. Yeah,
people, it
yeah.
doesn't crash
Now
them.
maybe
It
they'll fix
still
that.
ends up causing some performance issues.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, it's which is frustrating, but yeah, I just think it's definitely something to pay attention to see what EA does and what direction they go and if they're going to keep Origin around or not. EA, can I just like ask you to bring your games DRM
Yeah,
free
that'll
to
never
GOG?
happen.
Yeah, never gonna happen, but I would love it. I mean, the more like I'm trying, like my thing is when I purchase a game, like I try to now go to GOG, search for it there, and only buy it elsewhere if it's
Yeah.
not available DRM free.
For me, my
Yeah,
process
so
right
it's
now is GOG first, Epic Game Store second because it gives more money to the developers, and then Steam third, and
yeah,
everything else last.
yep. That's kind of the order that I go in as well. And the thing about DRM free content, just touching a little finale on that, there is, people worry or publishers worry about the theft of it and stuff, but you can still get any of these major games that have all this crazy DRM rights, or DRM rights, download rights management. you can still get them pirated. Like, it's not like you can't get access to them. It's maybe a little more difficult, but just leaving it as a free and open thing to do with DRM free is actually going to benefit you in a lot of ways, because then people can share their games and be like, hey, check out this game that's interesting. And if that person likes it, they
Yeah.
can support the
In
developer
addition,
if they
there
want
are
to, you know?
also
It's
people who will torrent games because of the fact that there is no demos. And if they like the game, they will
yes,
buy it
yes,
so that it's supporting developers. It's just easier to handle the game. They get the updates, all the other benefits of actually owning the game. But that way they make sure that they're going
yes,
to enjoy it first, because especially as, every game is, you know, 20, 30, 40 hours. Even if they put out a 30-minute demo, that doesn't mean you're going to like the
yeah,
game. And it's hard to get
yeah, yeah,
a good
absolutely,
grasp on that.
absolutely.
And so it's like having some way to put a real trial into the game is important. And right now, piracy is, for the vast
Agreed.
majority of games, the only way to try a game and make sure you're going to enjoy it.
Yeah, yeah, because if even if they do have a trial or demo, it's not enough to
Yeah.
really tell you if you like the game or
And
not.
thankfully, it's, in some
So
cases you can get,
it's
like Steam and Epic Store, you can get refunds if you've played less than 2 hours. But, if you spend
that isn't, yeah,
20 minutes getting graphic settings set up and tested, and then you spend 10 minutes getting through the intro cutscenes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes getting through tutorial, well, then you've only got an hour or less to actually try the game.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So I like the idea of DRM free games, and there's other things that play into it, and it's there's a lot of evidence that shows that it's not gonna really damage the publisher or the developer to have a DRM free game, and it's
Yeah.
damaging in the other
And
direction actually a lot of times,
I love
because
when we've
people are
seen
very
the few times we've
anti-DRM.
seen like developers put up their game intentionally on like Pirate Bay and stuff, so that people can try it, and then their game
Yeah.
sales increase after the game goes up on
Yes.
Pirate Bay. So
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's other things that come along with buying the official game, right? Like you mentioned, is there's all those things that come along with it, is like tracking achievements, the social aspects. A lot of games that you pirate, you can't play online. It's too difficult to make that function correctly. And so there's a lot of incentive to still purchase the game if you like it and just try the DRM free edition. And it also does help indie publishers get more popularized, right? So you can pass that game around and be like, look at this. And then when there's a big update, the person may want to purchase the game so that they can get the updates, or they may come out with a new game from that indie developer and they're
yeah.
like, hey, I liked their other
And
stuff. So it's proven
one
to
other
actually
thing that
help the
actually kind
industry.
of helps back that up as well, something that Epic had talked about, is that the games that are already on other platforms, like Steam, for example, that end up being free games on Epic Store, their sales after it stops being
Yeah.
free increase on other platforms. You'd think that if a
Yeah,
game
right,
is
right.
free on
Which is
Epic Store and everyone's hearing about it, they'd claim the free game and sales would drop on the other platforms, because at least initially. But no, they're
yeah.
going up on Steam according to developers that have, put their games up for free on Epic Store. Um
Yeah. It's a very interesting way
yeah, and I mean,
of doing things, and kind of shows
the
that
the
people
best
like the
example
openness of it.
of giving out a game for free and it doing well is Rocket League. That game was free on PlayStation Plus, and that
Yeah.
is arguably why it is as successful as it is. That was it was free. It was free its first
It
month. Like
blew up after
it
that.
launched on PlayStation Plus,
Yeah.
and so many people were like, "Oh, this is
Yeah.
interesting. I'll try it." Whereas, like me personally, I probably wouldn't have dropped $20 on that at first, but it's a PlayStation Plus game. Fuck it, I'll
No, it
try
kind
it.
of looked stupid at
And it
first.
was really fun. And I told
Yeah.
other people, "Hey, this is free on PlayStation Plus. You need to download it." Well, after 3 or 4 people I know own it, and then it's no longer free, other people are going to buy it to play with you.
Yeah.
So,
It was a great move. It was a great
and
move. So, yeah.
now it's
It's
one of
very
the few
interesting, I will
esports
say.
games that have lasted, which is wild, because a lot of much bigger,
Yeah.
much, more heavily backed, before the developers got bought by Epic, much more heavily backed, esports games didn't last anywhere near as long. Overwatch is a
Overwatch.
joke.
Overwatch League is such a joke. Well, I think that pretty much covers everything. It's a pretty solid podcast today. I feel a little bit out of it tonight, so I apologize to anybody that if I'm kind of
Oh yeah,
a
I have
lot.
not.
But
As everything
I
that's been going on has been happening, I have not been sleeping well. It's been tough, and with that,
yeah, I've
actually, I
just
kind of
been
wanted to, as we end it, say, just to everyone, if you're going to protest, stay safe. Make sure and do your best to keep some distance so you don't, contribute to virus spread and don't get the virus yourself and don't get
yeah,
sick. Yeah, wear a
wear a
mask.
mask.
Thankfully, pretty much every video I've seen has the vast majority of people wearing masks, which does help significantly cut down the spread.
That's huge. Well, the
Yeah,
WHO is reporting 85% of the
yeah.
cut, so that's a
And we
huge,
know it,
huge
and
deal.
we know it doesn't.
And
Yeah,
then
and we know
also
it doesn't
protect your
spread as
privacy.
well outdoors in general anyway. And so while
Yeah, that's
any
true.
type of
Yeah,
large gathering is going to cause a dramatic increase in spread, hopefully it's not as bad as it would be if it was 100,000 people gathering in a convention center to look at tech. Um, and
yeah.
in addition to that,
Oh
again,
man.
I mentioned this before as I was sharing, content creators and stuff, but just listen to what Black people who have had to experience, bad interactions with police and systemic racism and stuff. Listen to what they have to say. Really take it to heart, and just keep yourself educated on this stuff. It's really important, and we need to do everything we can to
Yeah.
combat it. Make sure that you're not just, throwing up a picture on Instagram, but make sure you're actually being an ally to the issue.
Yeah, yeah, you've got to do something more than that. If you're just gonna throw up a picture there or something like that, I mean,
Or
that's
or
almost
the I don't
offensive.
know if you heard about this,
It's
but there was like the picture of the girl that went out and made it look like she posed with somebody that was boarding up a building to make it look like she was helping, and then she got in a car
oh
and drove
yeah,
away.
that's for
Um, yeah,
that's unethical. That's attempting to make
yeah.
money and fame
And
off of
then
something that's
like
really
there was
unfortunate that's
a
going on, and that's just as bad as a
yeah,
company
and then there was
profiteering off
like
of it.
even like less severe stuff, but still just like really dumb of like a text message thread that had gone viral of a couple people that had been like drinking and then were like talking about the protests, and then they're like, oh, that'd be so fun, let's go, I'm gonna get my protest outfit, let me find a good outfit for that. It's like their priority in none of that conversation was about the issue. It was about let's let's go
Yeah,
pretty
it was
much
about
so
their
we can go get an
outfit and have
Instagram
fun at a
post and leave.
protest.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
So be
that's
an
not what the
ally,
point of
listen
it
to
is at
people,
all.
and just love everyone, and just yeah.
And educate yourself. I mean, that's a big point there. I think is educate yourself so that you really
Yeah.
do understand what's happening. There's lots of resources out there, and you don't have to spend
No,
money
not at all. There's
necessarily to
so
get
many
those
good so
resources
many
and
good free
understand it.
resources.
Yeah,
So
yeah, absolutely. So, well, I think that's kind of our conclusion here. So, thank you everybody for watching. This was WordCast number 74 again. So, we'll be back next week with more fun tech news and hopefully not as much unfortunate news.
yeah,
Hopefully some good
hopefully.
news. And I will say we do have more video content coming, and that's in the works. But it's sometimes a struggle to get the video content out that I want, but we've got more of that coming for sure. So I just wanted to note that there. Keep subscribe if you're interested in seeing some reviews of some interesting devices and stuff like that. I think that's everything I have to add. So if you're good to go, then I think that's kind of it
Yeah.
for us.
Have a good night.
All right. Well, I hope you all have a good night, and we'll see you all in the next video or podcast or news article or whatever. Thank you everybody for watching or listening if you're listening on a podcast service.